Thanks for staying with us. And if you're just joining us, welcome to Focusrite Pro's at Home event. I take great pleasure in being able to introduce you to our esteemed panel. And as before, if you have any questions, put them in the comment section and we'll get to what we can. Now, let me introduce you, Ceri Thomas from Dolby Labs, producer, engineer, mixer Steve Genewick, producer, mixer Rob Burrell, and Matt Pliskin. So, to start this off, we all know that people are working from home more now than ever. But Rob, you started working from home a good while ago. Why did you start that?
My starting of at-home work was based on the fact that after years of being in commercial studios and having young kids, that I was missing out on life, and so I really wanted to get back into my home environment, and technology caught up with the desire to do that, and then realized that as a mixer, being in again the same room all the time, it just allowed me to be better at what I do.
Oh, that's excellent. Now, Steve, you've been working out of Capitol for a really long time, but I know you work other places as well. Was the main focus for you to move home similar, or did it really come down to when COVID came out?
So I've had a stereo mixer at my house for a few years now that I kind of did kicking and screaming. I didn't really want one, but there's certain projects that can't afford to go to Capitol and places like that to be mixed. So I would mix projects out of the house here in a little room, little office I had. And then when COVID hit, we didn't know what was going to happen. And I had projects lined up, and I've been doing all this Atmos mixing. And COVID hit, we shut down Capitol on a Friday. And I think by the following Wednesday, I had a full-blown Atmos system in my living room. My wife just said, you know what? Nobody's coming over and you got to work. So we moved the furniture out, and in came the speakers. And I'm still in here now. Capitol is open again, so I can, so basically what I do is I mix here and then take it to one of the rooms at Capitol, give it the once over, and make sure everything's cool, and then send it off. So, but I'm not changing a whole hell of a lot once I get to the big rooms. I've kind of gotten this under control here. It's kind of nice, actually.
Uh-oh. Sounds like you're going to be working from home for a long time.
We'll see.
So what does that home rig look like these days?
My rig?
Yeah.
Right now it's based around, the interface is a 16 line with an R1. I've got it's a kind of a mishmash of speakers, which is not the best way to do it, but I've got PMCs and JBL speakers because that's what I had. And a Mac, with Dolby software and Pro Tools. And I haven't really run into anything I can't do. It's a very flexible system. The way I have it set up, I can go from stereo to 5.1 to 7.1 to Atmos pretty much without changing a single thing. I just changed the playback engine in Pro Tools, put the render up, and I'm in Atmos. If I'm in stereo, I just switch over to the RedNet interface, and I'm in stereo. And it's been working really well. And again, I'm seamlessly switching, going from, stereo to 7.1 to Atmos sometimes in the same day. And it's really fast, really convenient. The software works. It's great. Haven't had any problems. It's a rock solid system. So yeah, I'm really happy with it.
I'm sold. I'll take one. Now, Rob, you don't have the same speakers, but you have a similar kind of style setup, right? It's not all the same.
No, that's correct. I'm using ATCs in my front, and then JBLs all around for everything else. Yes, so similar situation. I was a JBL user for a lot of years, and when I switched to ATCs for stereo mixing about 5 years ago, I decided that I would keep my JBLs in the rear. And so when I did the Atmos setup, I thought, well, this has been working for 5.1, having 3 ATCs up front and the JBLs in the back. So I'll just, expand that way. So
nice.
Yeah.
So, truth be told, I've seen your setup.
Yeah.
I like your setup.
Yeah.
It's a lot of speakers, though. You're doing
Yes, it is.
like 85.14.
Yes, that's about right. That's about right. I'm actually set up for 11.1.4. Yeah. Yeah.
That's really good. And you're also using the Red 16 line, correct?
Yeah, 16 line with the R1, all on one computer for Atmos. Just like Steve said, the beauty of this is it's all configured and set up, and you can switch. I can work on a stereo mix. I can go to an Atmos mix back and forth if I have tweaks to do in a day. There's really no configuration change for me other than, like Steve said, switching from the Thunderbolt playback engine to the Dolby Audio Bridge engine. That's as simple as it is, and everything else is already configured from a setup standpoint in the R1, in the 16 line, and then the Pro Tools I/O setup changes when you load each session. So it's so seamless. It's really a dream. Yeah.
Love it.
I even streamline mine a little bit more because I have the 16 line right next to me down here. So I have the top headphone jack is stereo and the bottom headphone jack is the binaural out of the renderer. I just switch the jacks.
That's killer. That's great. I love it.
Okay, I feel like I should have even known that. Now I feel silly. That's really great. I feel that, Ceri's just kind of hanging out, and we should probably involve him more than just smiling.
Ceri.
You're happy
this
there?
Is great. Hey, at any time I don't have to talk about Atmos because the customers love it, that's even better. So,
well, it means you've done your job.
We're going to ask you some more questions about it. That is for sure. Speaking of which, what's new with Atmos? What's going on? What's the haps?
Well, I'm actually really excited. It's a beautiful confluence of things kind of coming together with the Windows support for the red lines and the updated Nuendo coming out soon with the integrated renderer. It's expanded out the possibilities for people working at home. So, rather than needing to have an external renderer to Pro Tools, Nuendo kind of builds it in. With the Windows support there, it's just fantastic, and that's the thing that's been really excited about this development of Atmos in the marketplace. Is yes, it started in the big rooms as Matt mentioned, but it's really kind of penetrating all markets now, and so. The manufacturers are coming together with new solutions and new ways of making things happen, and just the R1 is a great example of that. The ability to take what's in that back speaker and throw it up front so that you can actually hear through your mains is fantastic, and a differentiating solution. So that's. You guys are what's new in Atmos, and the marketplace is defining where we go. So that's kind of cool. So
that's excellent. So now, Steve, clearly being a staff engineer at Capitol, you're getting Atmos work from there, and I'm assuming you're also doing some freelance Atmos work. But Rob is doing mostly freelance Atmos work. And I only asked him because he started to take a sip. Yeah. And I wanted to catch him while he was drinking something. So
I threw it on the floor. It's spilled all over the place. Yeah, it's fine. Yes. So primarily indie work. And for me, that comes from even in the last 2 weeks, I had a choir project that I'm working on. And they came in to hear their Christmas special, which we mixed in Atmos. It's being broadcast in stereo, but they wanted it in Atmos to re-release later. They came in and heard what can happen with Atmos for the first time, and they said, when you mix our record next February, can we mix the entire record in Atmos? So it's, and I've recorded the whole record. It's full band, full orchestra. We recorded at Ocean Way, Nashville, and it's a 300 voice choir. It's going to be amazing, so people come in yesterday, in fact, a hard rock band that I've been working with for 15 years called me about mixing their next record in February. And they had seen me posting about Atmos and said, "Is this something you think we should do?" I said, "Well, of course it's something I think you should do. It's amazing, you know." And so I think there's the understanding of the consumer. They're becoming aware of it. They're experiencing it because it's easily available to them. And now musicians, producers, engineers, they're all, you know, they want to figure out, okay, how can we make this happen? So with this hard rock band, their engineer is the one who reached out to me. And so we talked about some ways I'd like for him to add some additional miking when they cut drums, so that I can have a little bit more fun in the implementation of the mix, knowing that it will be Atmos. So.
Well, that's a great answer, because that gives me the next question. Steve, are you noticing that you're putting different mics all over the place, to knowing I'm going to be in Atmos, so I want to make the sounds different than I would normally do on a stereo record?
Absolutely. Pretty much anything I record now, even if there's no plans for it to be in Atmos, I'm hanging a few extra mics here and there and thinking about it. You know, I tell a story early on when I started mixing Atmos, which was what, Ceri, like 3.5 years ago now or something like that, before anybody knew we were doing it. Yeah. I thought, you know, everything I was mixing was stuff that had already been recorded, and I had a big band project coming up, and I thought, let me hang some mics and figure it out, and I did that, and it just worked so well. You know, it's so much easier to create the space when you create it from the start. I'm helping mix another record now where they decided right from the get-go, you know, before they even started recording, that it was going to be in Atmos. So the elements are there. So it does make it a lot easier to deal with when it's thought about beforehand. And even this other record I'm working on, because they knew it was going to be in Atmos, some of the actual writing and production process took that into account. You know,
wow.
So they knew that they were going to have stuff to put in the back, and we can, you know, let's put some ear candy in here to make it move around and stuff like that. So hopefully we're getting to the point where the artist, the production is starting to consider this beforehand, and it not only makes it easier for us, but it makes it way more compelling also if you're thinking about this from the get-go. You know, it's much harder. I always say the hardest thing to do in Atmos is a 4-piece rock band from 30 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's really hard.
Sure, 8 tracks. Here you go. Make this spin all over the place.
Yeah, that's kind of, you know, I've had a couple like that where it was like, man, what do I do with it? I mean, you know, we have ways around it, and we've got some pretty good results with some stuff, but it sure is a lot easier when you got, you know, 50 tracks of orchestra from Abbey Road.
I can imagine. So that being said, when you guys are mixing stuff that was specific stereo, are you noticing that you're trying to reamp effects, or are you just creating different spaces just using plugins, or how are you trying to figure out how to take this wall? I mean, there's always been depth, right? We all know that we worry about the depth in our mixes, but now the depth is just everywhere. How are you achieving that kind of sonics based on, this is the plan, but I need it everywhere?
A lot of trial and error. Yeah, I mean, I have tools that I've built because the tools didn't exist when we started. You know, tools I've built to do that. You know, with different delays and stuff like that. I've built my own reverb schemes. I use a pre-delay scheme that spills through the room. I've done stuff like reamping stuff into the big rooms at Capitol. So kind of all of the above. And when you get a new problem, you figure out a new solution. That's been kind of the fun of it, to be perfectly honest with you. But yeah, there's, you know, I mean, I've had people say, you know, there's only 8 tracks on this. It's like, don't worry about it. We'll figure something out, you know. And some stuff is not as Atmos-y as other stuff. It depends on the record. You know, I mixed the Norah Jones album. And that's, you know, there's not stuff flying around the room. There's not, you know, it's just you're sitting in a nice space. I also mixed the LL Cool J thing where there's car chases and explosions, and so it really depends on what you're mixing.
Sure. Rob, do you find the same thing, or what are you doing to try to recreate?
Yes, absolutely. It's so song dependent, and the I agree with Steve. The adventure of all this is fantastic because to me it's a wide open picture, but proceeding with caution to keep the emotional impact of the record without making it you don't want to make it a gimmick, right? You don't want to make it a spectacular event and the song or the artist gets lost. Then in my opinion we've messed up big time. So experimenting with different things, like how do we move things around, how do we create an environment that is truly the word immersive, like Steve said, it doesn't have to be things flying around your head, but we get to bring the listener inside the mix instead of them, seeing the mix or being a spectator. We get to bring them inside. And so whatever tools it takes to invite them in, but without losing the true meaning of the song, that's the careful and beautiful journey of all this. And so, yeah, from utilizing reverbs and delays, both similarly to what we would do in stereo, but also finding new ways to go, okay, there are ways to expand spaces above, below, in front, and behind us. And so you take each song as it is and go, okay, how's it going to speak best?
So as you both are talking, part of me is thinking, now that Atmos is everywhere, I mean, let's just call it everywhere, since most boxes you buy at Best Buy now do Atmos, which I'm thankful for. The thing that kind of strikes me is, are these producers of these artists now coming at you going, oh, so this is what I'm thinking for the Atmos mix? Or is it still producers kind of going, I have no idea what this is yet? Are you seeing both, either? What is typically what's going on?
I think it's both. And you're getting that from producers and artists, and even some of the original mixers. I've had stuff that was mixed by, a couple, one song in particular was mixed by a very, very famous mixer who, they needed to deliver an Atmos mix, and he called me and said, look, can you do this? Because I don't know how to do it, but can I come and watch? And so I think everybody's interested in it at some level, whether or not they've taken the time to delve into it on how to do it. But yeah, everybody's interested in it for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I find that too. I mean, there's a certain amount of, hey, this thing is cool, I'm just going to do this, and there are mistakes to be made, without doubt. And what we see is everything from, oh, I've got the stereo, can you Atmos it, to what do I need to deliver so that we can Atmos it? The truth is, you can do a lot, right? So one of my favorite mixes that's been done is actually one that Steve was involved with, and what they had was 3 tracks, right? So they had 3 tracks, and what do you do with that? Well, you tell the story that's available to you, and in that essence, it was, okay, we're going to reamp, and we're going to kind of make it feel like you're in this space, and grab extra elements that we can do something with. So whatever source you have, there is probably something that can be done with it. It's just the depth then that you can go into with the exploration process. And I think that's the thing that people, have heard it referred to for the last 3 years as the Wild Wild West. It's clearly not the Wild Wild West, right? Because this has existed for hundreds of years. Just because you could swing a violinist from the ceiling of the studio, it doesn't mean you did. That musicality and the structure of the orchestra and all of those things came together from that's what told the story of the music best. And I think that's the thing that people are going through with Atmos right now is exploring what is the story of the music behind the technology, and the technology should just get out the way and let you be whatever it needs to be.
I think you just said my favorite thing now is going to be just walk around going, Atmos it, and then just walk away.
Atmos.
Kind of what happens sometimes.
That's right. That's right.
That would be the worst. Yeah, just fix it. No, just Atmos it. That's funny. So as the technology has changed, Ceri, because it started off where you needed to have the two separate computers. It is clearly not that anymore.
3 separate computers.
Oh, is that what you started with? Oh, brutal.
Capital and a good deal of the Universal Studios around the world are built on a three computer system at minimum. So there's the source machine, which is basically where all of your mixing gets done. The recorder machine, which is incredibly useful for actually just laying down the mix, making updates, doing the punch in to edit something, and then the renderer, which is kind of like once you've got the mix in the tape in the record machine, transferring that out. So and that's kind of emulated from what happened on the big dub stages in feature film mixing. So when that was the case, when I started in Atmos, it was back with on a feature film stage, and there were 58 speakers in the room that I was in, and there were 3 systems on one side of the large format console and 4 on the other, and they were all feeding into the System 5 and then back out into a recorder and then into the renderer. So to go from that and the needs of that, that massive room, down to Steve can do this in his living room on headphones and the kind of hodgepodge of speakers that he has, it is not a normal journey for an 8-year-old technology, right? The downscaling of that has been enabled by the marketplace demanding this, and so it's getting simpler all the time.
Because if I'm correct, I remember, Rob, didn't you only use a Mac Mini for a while?
Yes, for quite a while. I was on the Mac Mini, and I recently just went to a Mac Pro. However, whether it was necessary, I'm still not sold on the Mac Mini. The 2018 Mac Mini is a beast of a computer, and I was running full Pro Tools and the renderer all on the computer. But what I found is I am fairly aggressive with my plugin usage, and I'm a tweaker. I do not like to commit to anything until I say it's done. I always want to get in there. And so what I found on some very heavy Atmos mixes, especially ones that were kind of high track count pop mixes that I had done in stereo that I was doing in Atmos, I was pushing the limits of the CPU of the Mini to where I hate looking over my shoulder. I didn't want to have to worry about it. So I took the plunge with the Mac Pro. But I've got to be honest, that Mini is a stout little beast. And I did have 64 gig of RAM in it, which made a big difference. Even I originally had 32. And once I got into these, I went to 64 gig, and that opened up kind of the headroom of the RAM for dealing with the renderer. It felt smoother. But yeah, all that to say, yes, Mac Pro, but it was a Mac Mini only running this whole thing for quite a while.
So that's now the second.
We have a few. We have a few of our rooms at Capitol that are running off Mac Minis.
Yeah, they're amazing. They're absolutely amazing.
Oh, it's awesome. I was just going to say that's the second phrase now today. So it's Atmos it and Stout Little Beast.
That's right. Stout Little Beast. Yes, that's my new nickname. Yeah.
SLB. What up,
right.
Rob?
Yes,
SLB.
yes, SLB.
Sorry, I think that's quite funny. Well, it sounds pretty incredible from hearing that it did start with so many machines to now being able to do it, being more accessible, and having more people jump in. Feet first sounds pretty appealing, especially if you work for Dolby. I'm just saying, it doesn't hurt me either. It doesn't. Right. I'm not going to lie. Apparently, there are a bunch of questions coming in. So if you want, we can jump to that, or we can keep chatting a little while longer. I'm happy to do either, because I think we're going to bounce in and out. Actually, if we could throw up the first question, because it's a good workflow question, and I just want to make sure that we can ask it, because it's not going to be a quick answer, I'm sure. So I'm going to ask for both of you to answer it, if you would. You can decide who gets to start, but if you can cover a little bit of your workflow between the Red 16 line and the R1 when you're working in the box or when you're working with outboard gear. How are you guys achieving that? Or are you mostly just in the box right now?
I am, when I'm mixing here at home, I'm 100% in the box. Actually, even when I'm mixing at Capitol, I'm 100% in the box. So the the Red 16 and the R1 are just an interface and a volume control for me. I had the 16 line first without the R1, and it worked fine. It was a little inconvenient because the volume knob was up on my desk, and it was kind of a pain in the ass. And when I wanted to listen to speakers, I had to turn off speakers. It was just a little janky. And then but it did work. I will tell you that. As soon as I got the R1, it made it a lot easier. I got the 16 off my desk, no cables hanging out the back. Nice volume control. I love the mute and solo functions for the individual speakers. I use that all the time, especially for the sub. I'm constantly muting the sub to make sure that I'm not leaning on it too heavily. But yeah, I'm 100% in the box. I also have to make sure that I can bounce from room to room if need be. So I try to keep it that way. So for me, it's a pretty simple setup. And again, because of the way I have it set up, my 1 and 2 outputs are always going to my left-right speaker, and no matter what configuration I'm in, and I can literally, I don't have to change a thing. I just can seamlessly bounce between projects. It's been, and it was not quite that easy before I had the RedNet stuff. It was a little more cumbersome to do that. So yeah, it made my life a lot easier.
Excellent. Rob?
Yeah, very similarly, I am 100% in the box. Even when I work in stereo, I have sold racks and racks of vintage gear and am happier than ever in the box. There are so many creative tools, and we can do the job. So for me, I'm a similar setup. The R1 is my main volume controller. It allows me a headphone jack. I have an AM2 as well, but sometimes I'll have one set of headphones plugged into one, a different set in another, to just do a little bit of A/B if I'm wanting to hear stereo mix, or the Atmos binaural version, and just check and see how it's playing out on different headphones. For me, my inputs are a Pro Tools stereo input, a Pro Tools 714 input. I have a Marantz 7702 that I use for decoding, so I can listen to, whether it's UHD Blu-rays or streaming or Tidal, listening to Atmos mixes on Tidal. So that comes in. And then I actually set up and created one of the speaker outputs to just be a mono. It looks like a different set of speakers, but it just uses the speakers that I have and gives me a mono mix so that I can check things in mono. Sometimes I care about mono, sometimes I don't. But I like to have it. I like to have it as an option. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Like Steve said, it's so configurable, that you just kind of look at your workflow. And I've changed in the what have I had the R1 for 8 months or so, and I've changed my configuration a few times as my workflow evolves, as my understanding of how I want to be able to work and what is most functional. It's so easy to go in and make a change to some routing, and I'm good to go. Oh, I should also say I use Dante Virtual for the output of the Mac, so I can listen to anything. In fact, that's what I'm listening to right now for this podcast. The Mac defaults to Dante Virtual, which goes into 2 channels of Dante in the 16 line, which then feeds an input on the R1. So
Nice.
That's great. Yeah. So
yeah, I mean, just to jump off of that. So, you know, the outboard gear is a really interesting question. So for me, when I'm dealing with customers, you know, I go to studios and kind of evaluate what it takes to put Atmos into a facility, right? And so, frankly, the moment I walk in, if it's filled with analog racks of gear, right, that's the gateway drug to Dante, right? So you need to get an A16 in there. You need to, you know, take that, feed it all in, and be able to patch it through. And so that's often where, you know, the conversation around you know, Focusrite and RedNet starts, is if somebody has a bank full of, you know, analog gear, you know, it's going to be Focusrite in some way or another, or Dante in some way or another, and, you know, Focusrite is a great answer to that. And, you know, some of the Universal studios are built with that in mind as well. So the the output at the end of at least 3 of their rooms is an A16R, and you know, the other side of that is ready for analog gear to go in. So you know, it's very definitely a part of the workflow considerations. You know, is, you know, analog's not going away anytime soon, but how do we digitize it?
So I'm gonna jump off what Ceri said as well. Says, oh, that's good. For me, I mentioned the Marantz bringing a 7.1.4 in from the Marantz. That goes right into the line inputs of the 16 line. So the 16 line becomes a router of sorts for this, and the R1 controls it and can do more routing there. If I do need to bring anything in other than a microphone, I have some additional inputs left over, but I also then use the line inputs on my ISA Dante gear to as a gateway in via Dante to be able to dump anything else that I need to into the system. So yeah, like Ceri said, I mean, it's so great, and you've got all this routing capability, so you can put anything anywhere that you want. There's no limit.
You guys make me feel so good.
Well, the funny part is, since we've been doing all this with the Atmos, we've come up with we've solved other solutions at Capitol that have nothing to do with Atmos. Just, you know, because we have the 2 rooms that sit together, so we now I mean, we haven't installed it yet, but Matt knows about it. You know, we have a plan to route our headphone systems from one room to the other and be able to do that seamlessly. So this is all kind of piggybacking on everything else. So we're finding, you know, all kinds of new solutions for this stuff, which has been really fun.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent. So is it just the 2 main rooms at Capitol that you're going to be routing headphones, or well, I guess probably you could start doing it for everything if you wanted to.
Yeah, but the special thing about those 2 rooms is because the wall opens up, we use the rooms together. So to be able to use the headphone systems from both rooms to get more headphone mixes, because my life wasn't complicated enough. But, you know, we have a problem, and now we have a solution for it. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if we ever get musicians, you know, 50, 80 musicians back in the room together.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, you've got all those empty offices. You can, record one in each booth. Yeah.
Don't
XQPs
give them any
everywhere.
ideas.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a dangerous suggestion right there. Yeah.
Someone's going to want to try it.
Yeah, I did
Yes.
do one session where I had 9 singers, and they all had to be in their own separate rooms. So we had them in lounges and ISO booths they were everywhere. It was not fun. It worked, but it was not fun.
Oh, that's so rough.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah.
I'm being told that we keep getting a whole bunch of more comments, so or questions. So let's grab another question. I just tried out my first Atmos mix today in headphones, and I'm wondering if you guys could recommend using send-receive mode or bridge. It might be a dumb question. Still have a lot more to read the manual. That's excellent. Well, manuals are there for a reason. No. So what do you guys think?
Bridge.
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 There we go. Three bridges.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
That was the easiest question to answer.
That's right.
Let's see what we got.
And hi, Thor, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah?
That was a good guy.
What's the most casual place that you see Atmos being used? In restaurants, shopping malls, or different parts of the song coming from different places? So it sounds like that might be more of like when you're building these Atmos mixes, are you even thinking of where the final use is going to be, or are you just thinking of the song?
I mean, I always want to know what I'm mixing for. If it's just a straight up song that's going to one of the streaming services, or if it's going to be used for a film or something like that, TV, that's obviously a little bit different. It's funny, we were having on another call this morning. I now have a consumer system in my family room that's a soundbar system with satellite speakers, and so I've just in the last couple of weeks started listening to consumer stuff in my house, and I mean, we've been listening to that stuff for a while, testing it, but I'm not changing the way I mix for consumer systems necessarily. I mean, I want to have that in the back of my mind and know what these systems are doing to the mixes. But in the same way in stereo, I'm not mixing for the person listening on earbuds. I'm mixing for everybody. So if it sounds good on a hi-fi audiophile system, it should sound good on the earbuds. And I'm hoping we're getting to the same place with the Atmos, where if we can mix it on a really great system, that it will translate to the consumer systems.
Sure.
I love that. That's it's very similar here. I have an Amazon Echo Studio in our living room that we just kind of see, okay, what happens when we go there, and then we have a 714 home theater. Thanks to my kids, because the first time they heard Atmos in my studio, they said, "Dad, when are you going to do this in the theater?" And so I told my wife, the kids want it. I have to, it's their fault. So the great thing is I can take it. Keep trying. It's worth the effort. So I can take a USB thumb drive from the studio and go upstairs to the Marantz that's up in my theater and pop it in and see how it plays in a home theater setup. As well as listening to things on the Echo Studio. And like Steve said, I mean, for years this has been the debate, right? Do we mix for MP3s? Do we mix for headphones? Do we mix for the hi-fi audio file? Well, we should just be making the best mixes we can, being aware of all of these different things. But when you start to cater to one, another is going to lose out, right? So same thing. I think we mix it for the best possible scenario and just make sure we're not hurting anybody else down the line. So
are you guys seeing, and maybe this is a hit redundant, but are you seeing the request of submitting Atmos stems for like Netflix, let's say, or Hulu, or now HBO Max has announced, what was that today, that it came out that they're going to be streaming all of Warner's movies. So are you guys going to be, are you thinking about that, or have you seen requests for, I would like the stems so I don't just get your file and dump it in the show? Ceri's smiling and laughing. I think he's
Yeah,
got an
that's probably
answer.
Ceri question. I haven't run into that yet.
I've had one request for it was really not a request but a question. Okay, what happens if this gets placed? You know, do we need to do something different? And I'm not 100% sure the answer of that yet. It's something I need to talk to Ceri about. Maybe we could do that here, Ceri, right now. But
So,
yeah. But you know, it is
to go into it.
Yeah, it is a question. How do we, if this is going up into a theatrical, how do we? I mean, it's easy to pull up the mix and the Dolby renderer does its thing and it makes it play, but how does that translate in the context of picture? So do we need to have something different and make some concessions? I actually did one mix where I had separate 712 beds for drums, one for guitars, one for keys, one for background vocals, one for lead vocal. Just kind of experimenting with this to go, okay, you know, it doesn't make it too much more cumbersome to do the artwork, you know, the artful part of the work, or and it ended up to be pretty seamless. But yeah, that's sorry, that's a little rambling, but yeah, it's a question. It's
Yeah, I mean, it's a common question, to be honest with you, and you know, the answer is always it depends, right? And the it depends is almost inevitably down to what's happening on the final mix stage. So, you know, coming from that world, you know, I was a mix tech on movies that were, you know, being done in Atmos, right? So, you know, the first Atmos project that I did, you know, commercially was with Jonathan Wales over at what was Sonic Magic Studios in West LA, and it was a show called What About Love? And for that, Jonathan was working with Dennis Sands, who has an Atmos room at his facility up in Santa Barbara. So he was delivering an Atmos music mix into the final dub stage for that. That was a fairly rare occurrence at the time, and I think it still is now, because as much as, you know, Atmos has become integrated, and the way that the workstations have you know, integrated, you know, things like the B-Wave ADM imports and all of those things, it still requires a huge amount of collaboration between the various departments. So, you know, if Rob decides to start his you know, his objects on channel 11, that means that the 11th channel of the mixer is now not available for the dialogue guy, and so you need to kind of divvy up those objects and those inputs and configurations so that everybody's aware of what's happening on the final mix stage. And I think, you know, as people get more and more used to that, it's going to become more and more relevant. But to date, I think the most elaborate one that I've seen was actually done by Steve. So it was the rock and roll circus for the Rolling Stones, and, you know, very similar. They had a discussion about, I'm going to use these set of objects, and, you know, basically it was the first 64 for or the first 64 channels for Steve, and then the post guys got the second 64. But they ended up using 112 channels, I think it was, for the mix, and, you know, they were able to do that because they were collaborating on who was going to use what and what was going to be available. It ended up being absolutely fantastic. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely it's definitely an advanced class for that.
I think we have to also just keep in mind that if we're talking about Dolby Atmos for music and Dolby Atmos for film, even though we're using the exact same tools, I think we're using them in a drastically different way a lot of the times, and for a radically different purpose. You know, when you're dealing with music, you know, the Atmos film mixers, who are absolutely great at what they do, they have a different they have a different outcome. They have a picture and they have a story and all that stuff, whereas we don't have that. So I can be a lot more aggressive in my Atmos mixing and using the space and moving stuff and the rear speakers and all that kind of stuff, because I'm not part of a larger story that's being told. So, and because I don't have to worry about what's down the line, the next guy down the line, and does he need a bed and the objects and all that kind of stuff, I'm kind of free to use the system however I want. For instance, me personally, I don't use the bed hardly at all, and I have different technical reasons for that. But whereas the film guys use the beds all the time, but they're in a more controlled environment. They're in a movie theater. I'm in God knows where my mixes are being played at this point. So, so I think we have to acknowledge that mixing music only and mixing films are two completely different things, even though we're using the exact same tools. And they don't always, I don't think you could take my mix of whatever and just go, oh, can we use that in a film and drop it in, because it's going to mess up their whole scenario.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's great, because that means you guys get to remix stuff, and it's just another fee. So, yeah, right. I think we have another question coming up that seemed very interesting, and it might be more of a Ceri question, and it was based on Dante-enabled speakers. Let's see if we can get that up. Anyone using or trusting Dante-enabled speakers or monitors yet, or are most people just going to traditional style speakers? Are you seeing that, Ceri?
I actually tried it once and went away from it. To be fair, I've not tried a directly Dante-enabled speaker, but there are one-channel Dante devices that theoretically enable that on any speaker, and it becomes a distributed clock nightmare. And so, while the system is pretty rock solid for that, we switched that setup very quickly from the one-channel devices to a hardware DA box. So I think the technology will get there, and the infrastructure for the networks will improve to a point where that becomes a possibility and will kind of smooth the integration. But yeah, as of right now, it's Dante to amp and then speakers.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I know of the live sound sector using direct Dante-driven speakers. Haven't really seen it, carry over too much to the studio market. That said, with everything that the R1 offers, we're ready to support that, should you want to trust that.
Mm-hmm. I love it. It looks like we have one more question we're going to jump on. What type of calibration steps did Steve go through for his living room setup? Are his height channels ceiling mounted or on stands? Which is funny, because we can't say, I don't mean to jump in already, but when you look at the picture, you see Steve's in his living room, but you guys don't necessarily realize Rob's at home. Like, this is in Rob's house. It's just a completely different style of decorating for a studio.
Yes. You have better lighting than I do.
Yeah.
So again, I did this, this is kind of the, pop-up studio mentality, because I was by myself, it was COVID. So the calibration for me is, I don't have a Dolby calibrated room. They didn't come in and do it. I don't have an X curve and all that kind of stuff. I did it the old-fashioned way. I set up the speakers. I measured them. This is like the third incarnation of where the speakers are, because I just kept moving stuff around. And my trusty SPL meter.
Yes.
So I have a 7.1 system that I've been working on. As of last weekend, I now have ceiling speakers. Which are just little home theater speakers that I stuck in the ceiling. So I now have a 7.1 system, which again helps out quite a bit. But really, I just went through and make sure. I mean, the thing about about Atmos is, you know, it's, again, we're all using we're both using mismatched speakers and all that kind of thing. It's not so much that the EQ curve of the speakers is equal all the way around. It's that the level of the speakers is equal all the way around. So that's the most important thing, because the system doesn't care where the speakers are or how many speakers you have. It's just trying to steer your objects to the right place in the room. So the most important thing is to make sure those speakers are calibrated equally. And I just did it the old-fashioned way, put up pink noise and moved around the room, and it took a long time. I'll be honest with you. It's especially when you're doing it by yourself. There's a lot of contorting, and so. I will say that when I added the heights channels last weekend with the Focusrite system, it took me about 10 minutes to add those speakers. I mean, once I got them home, but to add them into all my different profiles, it was really simple and really fast, and it worked really well. So yeah,
that's great, and I bet your family loved having you play pink noise for long periods of time just to do measurements. I bet that went over really, really well.
Yeah, I have to warn everybody when that happens. Yeah. And when I originally set this room up, 2 of my kids were here working and doing school. So we had 5 people in the house, all on Zoom calls in schools, and I was doing. There's some records my daughter absolutely hates right now because she had to over and over and over again. So.
That's awesome. I think that's quite funny. It looks like we have another question, and it seems pretty interesting to me. So it's, are you mostly doing binaural headphone mixes or speakers? Now, I'm going to augment the question a little bit because I think I know the answer, but how often are you listening in headphones when you're listening to your Atmos?
For me, I'm actually checking a good bit. I think it goes back to the earlier question. I am not necessarily going to make changes based on the headphone presentation, but I do want to know. I mean, my kids are already consuming it, via Tidal and earphones. The reality is that's probably how most people are going to hear it right now, and I do care. I don't want to make drastic changes based on that, but I do spend time under the headphones just going, okay, how's this going to play out in the real world, because everyone doesn't have this setup that I have. So for me there's the main part of the mix is absolutely on the speakers, but really getting in and I think the main thing I'm listening for in headphones is that story being told accurately? Is the translation of the story and the intent still there, or have I done something that would be distracting? And then I might make a change. But typically what I'm hearing in my room is being translated well into the headphones setup. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say the same. I'm not checking. I check it towards the end. We now have, and I think it's on the Dolby document stuff, we now have a thing that we started doing with Capital and the Universal guys where we kind of divvy up the objects ourselves into different binaural settings. So now while I'm mixing, if I have something that I'm pretty sure wants to be in the far setting of the renderer, I can just dump it into objects down the line that automatically are preset to those settings in the renderer. So I can kind of gauge and I've done a couple hundred songs at this point, so I'm pretty good at guessing where it's going to go. But then I will actually put the headphones on and take a listen and make sure that it's doing what I want it to do. Again, I don't change my mix necessarily based on the binaural. I just try to make the binaural the best version of that mix I can.
Okay, Steve, I'm stealing that because I'm still at the stage where I go, okay, I think that object will need to be far or mid, and so I go change that one. You've got it preset. That's brilliant. I'm stealing it. I'm stealing it.
We'll have a call afterwards and give you the scheme.
Yes, I love it. Oh, that'd be so much easier and less thought process and more creating. Yeah, love it.
Right. Well, where it came from is when we started mixing entire albums. Because entire albums have to be sequenced, meaning you have to bring them all into one session. and and
They
sequence
have to be
stuff
compatible. Yeah.
So you can't, if you can't, from one song to the next, you can't switch the binaural information from song to song. So we had to make sure that stuff, so we just basically have, certain objects are off, certain objects are near, certain objects are mid and far, and you just throw that up. And then we all now, all the mixers at Capitol, we all use the same scheme. So we never have to change our
That's
renders.
brilliant. I love that. That's brilliant.
and then you bring it in, now it all works. So,
Yes.
that only took us, 3 years, Ceri, to figure out?
Yeah, it's
wasn't a problem.
you can guide somebody.
Yeah.
But it wasn't a problem until we started doing full albums. And then suddenly we had to come up with a new solution for a new problem.
Yeah, and that's been the really fun thing about working with you guys is you're constantly pushing the envelope of what's being needed, and so the changes that went into the binaural are a part of that, right? So adding the LFE into the binaural was a result of feedback from the music mixers, because they were using the system in a different way than post. So that went into the renderer, into the binaural in version 3.2, I think, and just coincidentally happened to be at the time where we were needing to do more on headphones, because we were all sent away from studios. But finding that balance, I think, was one of the other things that we've kind of learned during lockdown is that how much LFE do I put in if I'm only monitoring over headphones, and does that then translate? And I think that's the other thing that they've been kind of getting to is I hate to use the word template approach, but a rule-based approach for what level can you put in without everything breaking or it being just too weak. Yeah, I mean, it's been a learning experience and quite fantastic.
And I will say, it's been fun having Dolby and Ceri and the team, because the system, like you said, the render didn't do a lot of the stuff that we were used to doing. So I would call Ceri or complain to Ceri about, does it do this? And he'd go, no, it doesn't do that. But a month later, it did it. So even though it would just magically appear.
Yes.
So they've been great with us, and implementing stuff now, even though it's a system that was built for post and is still used in post. They've been great about implementing stuff that we need in it too, which is great, like meters.
Yes, meters. Meters are everything.
You guys, this has been really fantastic. Thank you so much for taking the time today and sitting and talking to us about all of this. Let's do it again, just in a while.
Yes. In the same room next time.
Yeah, no, that would in your mouth.